Hey everyone, Emily Jashinsky here, culture editor at The Federalist. It's official. Nicole Malliotakis defeated Max Rose in a very close House race in New York. She flipped that seat, which makes her one of the many Republican women who will be joining the class that enters the House of Representatives next year. It's actually a record-setting number. I want to read you something. This is actually from a CBS News article, which calls it the year of the Republican women. So 32 GOP women will join the next Congress, which surpasses the record of 30 Republican women that were sent to Congress in 2006. Now, this is good news, of course, but what's particularly interesting about it is this happened after Democrats and the left and the media have spent about, 5 years now almost, since Donald Trump announced that he was running for president, have spent all of that time railing against him as a sexist, and not just against Donald Trump, but connecting that to the broader party as a whole and saying that Republicans were enabling Trump and were necessarily sexist along with him and were complicit in his alleged sexism and his alleged anti-woman behavior. And here in 2020, Republicans are set to send a literal record number of women to the House of Representatives. People like Susan Collins in the Senate held on to their seats. And again, this all comes after the media and the Democratic Party spent years railing against Donald Trump as a sexist. We also saw something similar happen with the Republican inroads that were made with Black voters and Hispanic voters. Again, this is a similar thing where the Democratic Party and the media spent years denouncing not just Trump, but also his party more broadly as racist. And now the party has done better with Hispanic, Black voters, and female voters. What's particularly, I think, compelling about this pattern is that it happened. It happened despite a machine, the messaging of a machine, right? Like it's not just as though Democrats are sort of using this as their party line argument, right? Like we hear, arguments from both political parties all of the time. We hear their sort of like their messaging. That's one thing. That's always going to be like that. But the media takes the Democratic Party's messaging and amplifies it and legitimizes it and does all of that, all of that boosting. And still, clearly we saw another pattern. And what I want to think about is whether this is something that will be durable if Donald Trump takes a sort of step back from the Republican Party and, instead of running in 2024, maybe let some of the new leaders emerge to the party's forefront. Is this something that Republicans can replicate? Because Donald Trump is very much a singular figure in American politics. There is nobody like Donald Trump. There will never be anybody again like Donald Trump. What he does to our politics is, what he does is so irreplicable. But then the question is, are some of these patterns replicable after Trump? For instance, did Black and Hispanic voters turn out for the Republican Party, or did they turn out for Donald Trump? Did women turn out for the Republican Party, or did they turn out for the Republican Party under Donald Trump when Donald Trump was on the ticket? So I think we can expect, first of all, we don't know what to expect because we don't actually know how things are going to evolve and play out. If Joe Biden is inaugurated in January, we just genuinely have no idea. We have no idea how Trump would handle that. We have no idea how Democrats would handle that. It's really hard to sort of know exactly how things are going to unfold. But we do need to take two things away from this pattern. First of all, the machine's messaging did not work with a particular swath of voters and with enough voters to actually create increases for the Republican Party. That's really important. The second takeaway from this is that these things are happening in the Trump era, and we need to now figure out whether that will be true in the post-Trump era. Those are the two most important things, I think, to consider right now as we sort of mull over all of the new things that emerged and all of the shifts that are happening, the realignment that continues to roll on. I don't know. I mean, I think as singular as Donald Trump is, Republicans will at least be able to latch on to some of what will be able to maintain some of the support, because the party itself is becoming more attentive to the needs of the working class and more attentive to the extremely destructive behavior of big tech. That's a really important thing, and Democrats don't seem to understand what the public's real concern with big tech is, and they don't seem to be particularly responsive to the public when it comes to big tech either. They're very convinced that tech is actually helping Republicans and helping Trump, and they really aren't paying close enough attention to what people really want to see happen and what frankly should happen to the tech industry. And so I think Republicans are more attentive to and responsive to the public on some really key issues that Democrats are frankly behind the public on. That's really, really important. And again, the machine, the Democratic Party and the media's sort of collaboration into what feels like at times an unstoppable force, well, that doesn't work as well anymore. It worked when mass media necessarily had to appeal to a huge chunk of people. But now that there are, just as one example, here's something interesting. There used to only be a couple hundred shows on TV every year. Now there's, close to 1,000, 700, something like that. And that 200 number is, from not that long ago. And of course, before that, it was a much smaller number. And that's what mass media looked like. But now somebody like Stephen Colbert, for instance, can do really well in the late night ratings because he just appeals to one niche, and he appeals really hard to that niche. And so he's built this dedicated following. He doesn't have to put up the numbers that Johnny Carson did, because there's been so much splintering in our media landscape. But that splintering has another effect. The other effect of the splintering is that it actually decreases the power of the mainstream press. Now, I don't think the power of the mainstream press and the corporate press and the legacy press, whatever you want to call it, has been diminished to, the point where they've totally lost control. They're still the most powerful force, and they're collaborating openly and dangerously with just one political party. And don't kid yourself, that will continue after Donald Trump. Trump was their excuse to be open about it, but it will not continue after Donald Trump, because they have now landed on what I call the progressive or bigot binary. You're either progressive or you're a bigot. And so now that they've sort of been able to embrace this openly under the guise of opposing Trump, they will not go back. So that's where things are headed. And I don't think that their power is diminished enough that the new media has more control than they do. No, that hasn't happened yet. But that splintering means that it could happen. So as we look at some of these trends, like Republicans sending a record number of women to Congress after the left and the Democratic Party and the corporate media spent years decrying Trump's sexism and decrying the Republican Party's corresponding sexism. It's amazing, right? It's absolutely amazing. I think it's even amazing that this election was as close as it's turning out to be, given that you had the entire media machine and the Democratic Party and the tech industry aggressively opposing Donald Trump. I think that's amazing in and of itself. But as we go forward and we look at some of these trends, that's really what we have to wonder is how diminished is the power of the corporate media, and are these patterns durable after Trump is out of the presidency, and if he takes a backseat in the Republican Party? Those are the long-term questions. We can think all day, we can spin our wheels about the sort of general horse race questions, but really looking to the long term, those are the important things to think about. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe. We will be back soon with more.